Welcome to the Englund Gambit Refutation. So, if you don't know, this gambit has been played over 100,000 times, um, and is if you haven't seen it or if you haven't prepped against it, it's actually very, very easy to fall into a trap. Okay, so let's just begin with how it actually starts. It starts with 1d4. Black responds with 1e5. So the idea here is that it's a gambit. You give up this pawn, and black in return starts to develop pieces really quickly, with like knight c6, with plans for bishop b4, with queen e7, and then you might get quick knight f6s and things like that. However, there is one line that is played overwhelmingly amount, and it's literally hundreds of thousands of times across all the chess platforms and even over the board. So white responds with d takes e5, so they just take the pawn. This is completely fine. Knight c6, attack the pawn, and then white responds with a traditional white knight f3. So you develop and defend, everything is fine. So queen e7, this is where things get a little bit tricky. So if you've not seen this is where you start to be a little bit suspicious. Like, why move your queen to e7? It's blocking your bishop, and so what you have to like develop your bishop this way, or realistically, what's the plan here, right? White traditionally responds with bishop f4, which is completely fine. You're developing and defending at the same time, so it can never really be that bad. And this is where it goes a little bit left field. So queen b4, and this is the whole idea of the Englund Gambit, is that you start to kind of punish some of the weaknesses on the queen side. So here you are, checking the king while attacking the bishop on f4, while attacking the pawn on b2, and this is particularly powerful because after taking the pawn on b2, the rook is trapped, and it can get a little bit uncomfortable. So white plays the move, which is bishop d2, and that's great because you block the check while defending the bishop. Black takes the pawn on b2, and this is the move that you need to get correct. And if we look on the Ultra database here, you will see that bishop c3 gets played 48 times out of 300. It's about 50 in 300. So it's 1 in 6 times people are playing bishop c3, and this is the big mistake. Bishop c3, that should have a double question mark because that is a full-on blunder, and on paper it looks really, really good. Why does it look good on paper? Well, the bishop is defending the rook, the knight is defending the bishop, and the rook is defending the knight. So you've got this kind of triangle, which is super nice. And it looks like, okay, well, queen just has to go back and you defend, and you just kind of develop normally, and you win the game. But in reality, this doesn't work. Well, because of black's move, bishop b4. So you actually pin the bishop and the king, so you don't lose the queen. And here, actually, no matter what white plays, it is losing. So let's look at firstly the unfortunate queen d2, which is defend this bishop because it's being attacked twice. Well, after bishop c3, queen takes c3. Again, you've got this triangle where everything is defended, but unfortunately, you lose to queen c1, and that's actually checkmate, and that's checkmate in 8 moves, which is basically unheard of. And this is happening way, way too often. And of course, if you take with the knight here, black just takes the rook, and you've just lost your rook for no reason. And so you say, okay, well, what if you don't go queen d2? Let's say you just take the bishop. Well, after knight takes b4, this pawn is hanging to kind of check the king and get the king moving, as well as this rook. And we don't really even need to go through the variations here because it's completely lost. But after knight bd2, you can take the rook. Yeah, you can take the pawn, and it's one of those situations where the king is trapped with its own defenders, and you lose the queen. So we've already gone through a couple of variations where you're getting checkmated, where you're losing the queen, where you're losing the rook. So it's really, really ugly when you play bishop c3. And so we've gone through all of those bishop c3 variations, and just as a reminder, you won't, if you have played this, you're not alone. Look at the score rates; they are so low, and you are, you're completely getting crushed in this line. If you turn the engine on, I mean, it's going to be really bad. Yeah, it's minus 3.74, minus 3.9, and you're 6 moves into the game, so it's a crushing blow. So, what is the response? And this is where you can completely change your score, your win rate in this one position, and that is by not playing bishop c3, the natural bishop c3, but playing knight c3 instead. Why knight c3? Well, the rook is now defended with the queen. You now get a space for your white rook, right? So the rook can now go onto b1 with an open b file, and actually you're also developing at the same time. While, if you notice, black has just played his queen 3 different times, and it's only move 6. And now the natural response here is bishop b4, but we'll also look at knight b4 as well. But after bishop b4, you again use these quick moves to develop while attacking the queen. So rook b1. And why is this important? Well, you're kicking out the queen while also adding some further pressure on this bishop. Queen a3, only square, can't take the pawn because of the knight. And now white plays knight d5. I think there is a rook b3 move, but I really prefer knight d5. And the reason for that is that you'll see that white now, if we count the moves, black has played 1, 2, 3, 4 moves, and they are with the queen. And the king is still undeveloped, and you've only developed the knight as well. And you've not really achieved anything. You've won back your pawn, but so we're equal on material, but there is no real big threat, and there is a lot of weaknesses. And what are those weaknesses? Well, now with knight d5, you're attacking the bishop 3 times, and you're attacking the weak c7 square. And this is really important because it's a fork. So after bishop d2, the reason why black can do that, obviously, it's check, so you have to take back. And if you play something like king d8, so king d8 is very common in these lines just because there's no real defense. You can't actually defend the c7 pawn. If you go back here to try and defend, the white queen can just exchange and then take this pawn. So black has to play kind of one last roll of the dice, which is queen takes a2. And this is a little bit tricky. And if you haven't seen this before, you could, again, fall into some traps. So it's attacking the rook and the knight. So if you play the kind of mistake, which is knight takes c7 after king d8, black is actually attacking the c7 knight and the rook on b1. So after knight takes rook, queen takes rook, and actually this is you haven't actually won any material, and now it's looking a little bit dire because black's queen is really causing some problems, as well as a trapped knight here. Both squares are taken away for the knight, and there might be ways for you to just start moving these bishops, the bishop along, and starting to grab this knight. So you can't be too hasty. You need to know even these tactics here. So this is I will put this as a mistake. So actually what you do here is you just simply move the rook again onto this really powerful d file. And the reason that's so powerful is that actually to defend this c7 pawn, black has to move the king to d8. So the king is being moved actively onto the d file, and you'll see that this has even further impacts down the line. So black has stopped the one fork, but white now goes for the other fork, which is kind of sick because you just don't see this very often in chess, where you're attacking both c7 pawn and f7. You're attacking on both sides, and the only defender seems to be a king, which is just it just shows how bad the black's position is. And here I actually, when I create my repertoire for these lines, I actually create the most natural move as the main line. So in this case, the main line I've said is knight takes e5, even though it's not the best move. So let's go through knight takes e5. You've got quite a lot of options here, but the best one is queen c3. You'll notice that this c7 pawn is still weak. this e5 knight is under attack, and if the knight kind of moves this way, there's also the g7 pawn, which is also under attack. It's just a complete mess of a situation here, and it's very, very hard to kind of keep this alive. Now, what some people do is that they say, okay, well, I will give up this pawn on c7 because I can run back this way, but it doesn't really do anything. So f6, and you've got the beautiful move, which is knight to e6. So you give up the knight. And this looks a bit weird, but the key element is that now that this rook's on this d file, you want to open up this line for some discovered attacks. So after d takes e6, you have got a couple of options again, but queen c7 is the most instructive. And after king e8, knight takes f6, you give up a knight because of this beautiful d file. And after pawn takes, you have rook d8, and that's checkmate after 16 moves, which is kind of wild. Probably will never happen in game, but this is just an idea that you just need to know. You don't need to kind of memorize this at all, but it's the idea and the structure, which is actually get these pieces on the d file when the king's there. The king can only defend the c7 pawn can only be defended by the king. In reality, and there are so many ways to win this game. So now what happens if we get knight h6 to try and defend the f7 pawn? Now there's even more tactics, and you'll notice that actually we are quite quick, and white is very quick and aggressive with these moves, and that's because you want to just show that actually the king is so weak, and you just want to be quite instructive. And this looks a bit strange, right? But again, it's all about this d file. So if there's many options here and they all suck for black, so after d takes e, the easy one is knight b4. You attack the queen while a discovered attack on the king. And so knight b4, king e7, knight takes a2, and you've lost the queen. Now, if not d takes e2, if f takes e6, you can just go for it again. And this is the kind of beauty of this, right? You've got so many active pieces, and black is just not doing anything. So again, you've got the queen. And finally, after I did look at queen a5, and part of that reason is because actually, if you look at the Ultra database, 2 games were actually played here with queen a5. But they just result in complete an annihilation. So it's 3-0. So, I mean, we can look at queen a5, but the easy win here, let's have a look at this, is queen takes a5, knight takes a5, e7, king has to go to e8, and then you've got the fork here. And I'm sure there's 100 wins here as well. Now, let's turn this off. Let's go back to the main lines. So after knight h6, e6, we've looked at d takes, we've looked at f takes, we've looked at queen a5. Let's just quickly look at the one move, which is d6. And here, I think there's many options. I think you can go e7 here with some cunning tricks, and also e takes f7. I'm just looking because there are some tricks here where you can effectively play e takes f7 and then knight takes h7, where the rook can't take the h7 pawn because of promotion. But to be honest, it's not even if we look at the engine, e7 and e takes f7 are both really, really great options. I think e takes f7 is perfectly fine, and white has lots of options here where they can just do some traditional. They can actually develop in multiple ways, but because the king is so unsafe and you want these kind of diagonals, you may actually want to be developing with g3, bishop g2, and castles. In previous lines, you might want to do e4, bishop e2, castles, when that was when when the e file wasn't so open. But because this is open, you've got many ways now to try and not only just win some material, but potentially to actually just checkmate the king. And let's actually turn on the engine, and if we just make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, I mean, it's looking really ugly. It looks like the next move is g3, and then black looks like it's just going to try and swap off some queens, and then just take a worse endgame. But yeah, you're plus 1.74 Black has got zero compensation really, and it's looking really good. So overall, this is a probably a little bit too deep of a line, but there are some kind of overall concepts that you need to understand, which is knight c3, never play bishop c3 in this line, and you will and this line has been reached literally hundreds of times. Sorry, hundreds of thousands of times, and after knight c3. The really great idea here is that this c7 square is extremely weak. This rook gets really active, and ultimately, when the king starts having to defend the pawn on c7, you start bringing the rook in and opening this d file, and you develop either with the e4 bishop e2, or you develop with g3 bishop g2, and black is in some real problems.